Thank you for all the presentations. I have the pleasure to introduce the next keynote speaker, which actually, without them, I think this conference wouldn't be possible at all. The next keynote is D+ Architects. D+ is an architect and urban design studio that was founded in 2013 by Shannon and Pedro Henrique de Cristo. They work in three main areas. One is they do research, they do social impact design, and then try to impact also public policy. They work with a very strong component of evidence-based design, and I will briefly talk about the backgrounds of the founders. So Pedro Henrique de Cristo is a co-founder of D+ Studio and executive design director of the park and Institute Cité, both located in the favela of Vidigal in Rio de Janeiro, where he integrates the research, design, and development of architecture, policy, and technology. He has been 2 times a UN laureate of urban sustainability and integration of art and activism. He was trained at the Oficina Arquitectura and has a master in public policy from Harvard, where his thesis was turned into the Studio School of the Year 2013, and here with Caroline Chan de Cristo, the Appleton Fellowship. Caroline Shannon also is the co-founder of D+ Studio, Design with Purpose, located in the favela of Vidigal in Rio de Janeiro. She brings a range of experience in architecture, urban design, health, art, and the environment to integrate the design to public policy, architecture, and urbanism, and technologies to improve people's lives. Before founding D+, her professional experience included work at the Museum of Modern Art in New York, Shipley, Bullfinch, Richardson, and Abbott Mass Design Group, and Somatic Collaborative. She graduated from Amherst College, cum laude, with an interdisciplinary major in art and aesthetics, and from the Harvard Grad School Design with a Master of Architecture 1 program. So please join me with a great applause for Caroline and Pedro.
Thank you, Felipe. Thank you again, everyone. It was a great start to our afternoon, and we're looking forward to more interesting. So Pedro and I are going to speak about some of our work at Plus D. And more than the straight line or the curve, we believe that design can and must do much more. So we work in the pursuit of bringing together social function, aesthetic excellence, and technological innovation in a global practice that's based locally in Vidigal in Rio de Janeiro. And we think about the majority world, which is Africa, Latin America, and Asia, as the center of the kind of problems and challenges that we need to solve through design. We know that this is going to be home to 93% of the world's urban growth will happen here by 2050, and is already home to 82% of the world's population. So this is an essential way of framing, I think, a lot of these discussions about urbanism. Along with this, we know that today 1/7 of the world's population lives in an urban slum, and by 2050, that number will be up to 1/3 of our population. So the issues that we've already started discussing today about informality processes of building cities are central to the kind of work that we're doing. Looking at some of the challenges that we face in our cities, we have the pressures of urbanization, climate change, and inequality that are putting great strain on many of our systems. So from the ongoing public health crisis that we have here happening in Brazil and throughout the Americas of the Zika virus, to droughts, too much or too little water, and mounting pressures of violence and inequality that we're also facing. We know we like to think of Latin America as a laboratory for this. As was just mentioned, Brazil and Latin America is far ahead of the curve of urbanization. So with 75 up to 80% of our populations living already in cities, we see this as a great opportunity to research, design, and develop solutions that can be scaled and applied, and in similar contexts throughout the world, especially in Asia and Africa as their cities are continuing to grow at really staggering rates today. So we had the opportunity to investigate many of these questions through the Appleton Fellowship from the GSD, where Pedro and I visited 6 cities and looked at over 30 projects to really build an understanding of the distributed intelligence we have about the types of projects that are working to solve questions of urban integration. And looking at that through the lens of architecture and urbanism, but also through public policies and technologies. And this work has all, we're looking and continuing to accumulate this kind of intelligence. And in doing that, and in our practice space in Rio, we like to think about the city as a system, and I think especially in the context of today's discussion about landscape as urban, and this is a really essential point. So the city as a system works as one that's decided both from the bottom up, but also top down. And as the structures and processes that we set up have created certain challenges for our cities. And we see that the patterns of violence, and this is a conversation we've had many times with Mauro, who's here in the audience, which is our collaborator and the president of Parc CTA, that the patterns we have of violence being inflicted on many of our communities and lack of services, infrastructure, etc., is many times returned, both literally, but also in systemic crises we see of public health, infrastructure collapse, and other problems. So in this execution of the Divided City program, we're working to think of ways to impact strategically to improve these processes. We've done that by setting up a matrix that's interdisciplinary, that's based on the idea that people are the most important. We do many activities that are located in physical spaces, and this includes city building. And we've exchanged much knowledge and experience in these spaces that we've come up with various different kinds of instruments for building our cities, for living in them, for producing things, etc. And we've used these instruments to create a new type of space, which is the digital. One type of space that's becoming increasingly important. And so we work always between these disciplines and forms of thinking and working in this idea that now we live we need to work between disciplines and in both physical and digital space to make the kinds of future cities that we imagine. We work in a process that integrates design into the technological innovation process. And this begins with research, which has several of its own components, design, and development. And this cycle is one that's continuous. So we're always implementing ways of learning what's working, what's not working, and this feeds back in a continuous cycle that's always improving the impact and results of our projects. And this happens at a range of scales. So from the continental, where we see the flying river system that's come under increasing stress as the water passes over the continent, comes back from the Andes, and typically falls in places like Sao Paulo and southeastern Rio, southeastern Brazil. But this system we saw was failing last year with such intense droughts. And so moving from thinking about these kinds of continental landscapes and systems all the way down through the macro region, say of Rio, Sao Paulo, which is the 3rd largest macro region in the world. To the scale of our cities, our metropolitan regions, which we see as something that really needs to be integrated, all the way down through different scales of community, architecture, industrial design, to nanotechnology. How can these scales be integrated and designed to serve us and our cities and spaces better? We've done this based strategically in the community of Vidigal, which we call Rio Lab. So we moved there, and Pedro for 3 years and myself for 2 lived in Vidigal to understand how these different scales and processes and the city as a system works. Our practice plus D continues to be located in Vidigal, and we see this as an amazing place to test and improve the types of interventions that might work throughout Rio, Brazil, and the world. So Vidigal shares many of the characteristics of the landscape, the socioeconomics, the challenges of these communities. It has a great deal of resonance. So from there, we're working on various projects that build into the definition of a site will, instead of a divided city, a progressive city. And we see this one that begins with equity of access to services, such as health, public safety, education, economics, etc. That builds into access to participate in the decision-making about our cities. So the understanding that politics is translated directly into space is something that we work a lot on this idea. And this results in the type of urban development that we have, and building connectivity, productivity, sustainability, and resilience through these other means is incredibly important in building an equal and productive city. So we're going to present a few projects to you all this afternoon. The first of these we call Future Now. It's focused on education. This was really the beginning of our practice as Pedro's thesis, which brought together these ideas of thinking about a new concept for a school that brings together architecture and urbanism, public policy and technology to build a user experience that's more positive. In the studio, the School of the Year 2030, which happened in 2012, and I had the chance to participate in. So bringing James Hackman's Nobel Prize-winning economist, who proved that the sooner we can impact early childhood development and learning, the more return we'll have as a society and as an individual. So we're applying through evidence, the collection of evidence across different disciplines and forms of research, to thinking about the types of spaces for education that we need to build in our cities and communities. And an essential part of this is an idea about democracy and the necessity for spaces for democratic participation and action as part of the school, which is such a critical part of the social action of many of our communities. So I'm going to pass to Pedro to continue.
Thanks, Carol. Good afternoon, everybody. So, like Carol was saying, when we were doing the research about education, we realized, especially in slums, the schools were the social hubs, the cultural hubs of the community, also because the space is very scarce there. But one key thing that really surprised us was the role of leadership of the principals, not only into matters that regard education, but also public health, even urban development. So what we propose is let's dig more into this and see how can we use space to democratize democracy. Then we had all the protests since the Arab Spring, especially in Northern Africa, but also in Brazil, Venezuela, Ukraine. And one key thing in them all, even though they had many differences, was that they all were demanding for more participation in public decision-making, the formal process of the building of the city and the building of the vision of the state and society. So we were very curious, and everybody knows that democracy started in Greece, but nobody knows how, right? So after researching this paper that was 349 pages long, it was about Greek ceramics, we found out how it came to be. And the fact is that the birth of democracy was as much as a spatial reform as a political reform. What happened is that the whole power of the state was concentrated in the aeropagos, this aristocratic executive power comprised of the rich families of Athens. And then when Euclides began the process with the support of the communities, they decided to divide the city in 10 different areas called philis, which had the same population. And each of the philis would have a lottery and appoint 50 members to this cabinet. So what's really sad about democracy we have today, and the model that was developed in the 19th century, is that it's inspired directly from the Roman Forum, which was designed to be aristocratic. So the fact is, we have a design problem in democracy today. Then we start to assess what are the key processes for citizens first to be part of the city, like Julius Caesar used to say. Doesn't matter if you know the laws and education, if you're not a part of the city, you have no way to become a citizen. And then how can he engage in democracy in a productive, decisive way? So we created this program of the Digital Agra as 3 types of space: a space for systematization, for people to understand how things work, a space for synthesis, for people to make things happen in an interdisciplinary or even multidisciplinary way, and a space for articulation, for people to present their ideas and decide together as a collective. Here's the first conceptual design we did, that's the entrance of Vidigal. And the mayor wanted to buy and build this building, and we're like, hold on, you know, we're just starting our careers, let's do a public contest. So concursos, yes, but you're totally right. And we developed this program together with the contextual intelligence of people like Mauro Quintanilha that's sitting here, because the truth is, the knowledge of communities has been totally disregarded. And it comes out of prejudice and the lack of perception in our sites that the database we have access, the knowledge, our training, is incomplete. And that is much talent in Islam as that is in Harvard or anywhere in the world. So from that, we start to realize that the problem is you have different contexts and resources and capabilities, and you have to adapt to those. So where is the key? Ray Koolhaas himself, which is one of the greatest architects we have, always starts his projects with the program. So the key is the program. And then we realize, okay, if Mauro here doesn't have marble, glass, and steel, but has a lot of debris and tires in the trash dump, what can we do with it? So we built this contention wall that's also public space, and is one of the key parts of CTA, with 386 tires that were in the trash dump over there, that Mauro led the cleanup. Please raise your hand, Mauro. Palmas, por favor. It was 23 tons of debris and 112 square meters of open public space. And why is this so important? Because there has been a really wrong dichotomy in architecture and design, which is the greatest talent can only do aesthetical design and social designs for the second tiers. But the truth is, social function and beauty have to come together. There is no real dichotomy. Just because you do the one doesn't mean you can do the other. In truth, beauty makes things more effective. So from there, we started the design process with Mauro. It was an uphill battle, but we managed to do so. And the interesting thing about a project like this that integrated the formal training that we bring in +D together with the contextual knowledge of the community is that the tires in Vidigal became the vernacular. It came a point in the construction process where we couldn't find tires anymore in the community because other people were building with the tires. So we had to go to Mercado São Sebastião in the northern part of Rio de Janeiro and come back with 400 tires. And just as an anecdote, when we went there and said, oh, we want 400 tires, and we're like, where do you want to bring it from? To Vidigal? Everybody, no, for God's sake, you know, everybody was afraid they're going to make a microwave. You know what it is, right? And this project was very special to us because it was the way we found to develop not only our process, our matrix, but also how do we engage the contextual knowledge of the communities and as in addition to the practice of architecture and design. In a way that's not missionary work, that's not social do-gooder, but to make things more effective. And here in CTA, it's for me the most beautiful park in Rio. Parque Lage is beautiful, and Jardim Botânico too. I would say Jardim Buller Max, we have to get there, but we have Mauro that's doing great work. And the truth is that the key thing there was that what we see in Medellin today, in the great projects like Juan Carabobo and others, is that the city hall is tied because it has to spend a lot of its resources on the maintenance of the spaces. And the key thing to do it with the help of the community is you have to engage the community in the design process and the construction process, not as builders or anything, but in the decision making. Because you only take care of things that are yours. So the name of the park is CTA, and it's inspired in the name of sítio, a small farm, as we all know in Brazil. And the Tiesang, which is a beautiful red bird that has indomitable characteristics, the hardest to hunt in the Atlantic forest, and which represents very strongly the spirit of the park. So we managed that through the leadership of Mauro, integrate our design practice, to create a space for tolerance where Protestants and Candomblé share the same space in peace, where we develop business activities, workshops, education activities with people from Harvard, MIT, PUC, or for other favelas, and that became a hub for the democracy in the community, but democracy tied off to the thinking of the design decision making of the urban space, like Tomás was precisely doing. So after that step, we realized, no, now we have to go to the urbanization process. And then there was a petition from our members of the community for us to design a public staircase and square, connecting the park to the grid of the favela. And we were not thinking about the scale of the urban design, really. Me and Carol come from a stronger architectural background. But what we realized when doing the design of the staircase was that there was no way this was going to work if we didn't do the landscape design. And we were really fortunate to have the support of Pablo Lazo from Europe, who we met through Marisa Moreira Salles, and Tomás Alvim Arquitectura. And we did a series of modelings of the ways of the water in that space. And what we did here is what I think is the key for landscape design as well, which is multifunctional structures. You know, we don't have that much space, we don't have that much resources, and we have to deal with a lot of problems at the same time. So this staircase is three things at the same time. It's a vertical public space, it's a contention structure for landslides in Vidigal, and it's also a water collection, treatment, and distribution system, which is a first part of a larger project in Vidigal, in which we are doing the assessment. We built the first 3D model of the favela, and did the first mathematical modeling of the ways of the water, both the natural sources and also the ways of the rain. And what we want to do is that instead of relying in the central grid, that every time it's in stress, cuts the supply first of the favelas, why don't we develop autonomous grids, especially for water and energy? They are not off the grid, it's a stupid idea. They are complementary to the main grid. And then when the main grid collapses, the favelas will still have water and energy. So the key here is to, is to collect the water before it hits the built space. Because once it hits the built space, it becomes black water, and then you can just treat it to discharge. So with the help of ARUP and other partners, we are developing this project, and the idea is to use CTA to become the catalyst of the transformation of Vidigal in the first integrated, sustainable, and resilient favela in the world. So here's some images, it's quite beautiful. Here's the vision of the park on the left top. In the right, that's the only place, it's the peak of the Two Brothers Mountain. And it's the only place where you can see the Lago Henrique de Feitas in its full shape, which is a heart. So what you say is that you do the sky path that Charles was mentioning to get to the heart of Rio. And you can only do that through City Airport. This is another project which brings up in the scale and the result of the integration of the contextual knowledge of the community, of the practice, and of myself and Carol. This is a competition we did for Casa da Sustentabilidade in Campinas. We didn't win, but we are very proud of this project. And it represents a lot how this practice that seems informal, at a little scale, with not a lot of technological innovation, can be synthesized in a program to be developed anywhere in the world, from Campinas to Rotterdam, New York, or Cape Town. So one other concept really working, and we do believe that architecture and design have to reconcile with many things, but in order of priorities today, with technology, science, you know. Architecture is about the synthesis of arts and science, and we have a tendency to follow a lot more in the artistic side. First, because it's a natural tendency for us, and second, because it's much easier. But we understand that we have to understand how the city works as a system, like Carol was saying. So what we're doing right now in Vidigal, favela, you might think, is the same thing they are doing in Manhattan. We are doing the first 3D mapping of all the built space of the favela and of the underground water and sewage pipes. And what's the reason of it? Alex Washington, our friend over there, he was the chief urban designer of Mayor Bloomberg in New York for the 12 years he was in office. And he was responsible to deal with the problem of Hurricane Sandy. And when Sandy happened, they had all the pipes overflowed. And this was a debt of $70 billion. Imagine, this is huge for a city like New York, and the consequence in places like Vidigal, Rio de Janeiro, Recife, which Roberto will present later, can be much more degrading. So what we are doing right now is developing ways to measure this underground system and build this 3D model, both surface and undersurface, then do mathematical modeling with 1 centimeter precision to then see how different design strategies, design research, can relate and interact with different alternative scenarios of climate change and social collapse. And the fact is, because our pipes are smaller than the ones in New York, our technology is superior. Because there they have a pipe that's this big, so they have a robot that's not even microtech. But in Vidigal, you know, in all the favela here in Brazil, the pipes are this big. So how do you measure this? Then we team up with the Nanotech laboratory in Campinas, and we are doing design that goes through different scales like our show. So the big takeaway from us is that we didn't do landscape as urbanism as a first choice, not practice. We got to landscape as urbanism because of necessity, and that's the same thing for everybody. But there's a really key point there, is that the architectonic model to work at this scale, with this level of complexity, variables, actors, and need to scientific knowledge, is not enough now. And what we want to discuss with you here, and try to find a collective solution, is how can we evolve the discipline to incorporate all these variables to become more effective. So our proposal and our understanding is that doesn't matter to do just the housing, like Aravena is great, but it's not enough. What we know already from Medellin and the work Alejandro Echeverri is that first you have to do the grid. But what they realize is that this is not enough either. First you have to do landscape design. We are very glad also that this practice that seemed to be missionary work, social impact design, and other brands, we proved that you can do innovation to the city and to the world from a favela. So now we work in New York City, Cambridge, Medellin, Cape Town, and other locations across the globe, because the level of access and interaction possible makes it realizable for people like us to go to a favela, to go to a slum, and do serious research, design, and technology. Always have in mind that the most important thing for our or any practice, but especially design like Charles put, that's about how things ought to be, is to advance the human condition. But always have in mind that we have to use the resources at hand to apply design to create the aesthetic we desire for our world, because these things should never be separated. Thank you very much. And to make the talk even better, now I invite you guys for a coffee break. So.